Namaste everyone. Welcome to another episode of Navavimas podcast. So today we have another opportunity to talk with Dr. Raja Bhaumik. We remember we had a really good talk and good discussion on the Indian freedom struggle and the book that he has written. Namaste Rajada.
Namaste. Namaste.
Jai
Namaste
Shri
to
Ram,
you
Vande
and all
Mataram.
the viewers. Jai Shri Ram,
Yeah.
Vande Mataram.
Yeah, so today we will be reading a specific chapter from the book. The book, as you can see, is here. So we will be also sharing the link how to buy the book. And Rajata, first of all, how are you doing?
I am doing fine, especially in the midst of such an august gathering. It could not have been better. Thank you.
Yeah, so people really liked your podcast previous that we had. It was really people like
Thank you
a
so
lot
much.
of people had comments that you have written a very good book, and it was really one of
Thank
the
you.
best podcasts we had. So it's a privilege for us to actually host you again and learn a bit more about the unknown history of Indian freedom struggle. So over to you. So today, what we will be reading?
The first thing that I'll be reading out today is the influence of Swami Vivekananda on the course of the Indian freedom struggle, and then we will be talking about some of the revolutionary activities in the province of Madras in British India. And my third and fourth topic will primarily revolve around the non-cooperation movement, including the Khilafat movement, and what was the response of Mr. Gandhi to the various activities of violence which were carried out during the course of that particular movement. And
Yeah.
the
So
last topic will be this: what was Mr. Gandhi's reaction to the assassination of Swami Shraddhanand in December 1926?
sure. Thank you for that information. So, before we start the reading, audience, are you able to read the text? So, we want the audience to actually read the text with us when the author reads it. So, if you can just confirm whether you're able to read the text, the PDF is already there on the screen. Pranam Saptarshi, Jai Shri Ram, Sanatan, Jai Shri Ram, Nina. Okay, zoom a bit. Thank you. Is that okay? It's okay. So we will start reading. I think it's okay now. Okay, yeah. So Rajata, please go ahead with your reading.
Thank you. Uh, as we had discussed during the course of our first podcast, one of the things that I always wanted to highlight in the book that I have written was the critical role that was played by the revolutionaries, who to my mind were the unsung heroes of the Indian freedom struggle. Without the activities and without the presence of such eminent souls, it would not. The British would not have been forced to take a decision to leave the country in 1947. It is a myth that the Indian freedom was actually won on the basis of a non-violent movement, and ultimately we must remember that ultimately it is through the efforts of one and all that we are today able to walk on this land as a free son and daughter. So it is important for us to pay respect to the legacy of the revolutionaries who had no qualms of making the ultimate sacrifice in their bid to ensure that Bharat Mata is not in chains. Uh, the revolutionary activities were carried out in various parts of British India, and it was a very much coordinated effort that ultimately led to this particular movement. So we should not think that the revolutionary activities in most part of India were a piecemeal, but it was actually a coordinated, which I want to talk about in the course as I write other books. So therefore, we'll first of all start with the revolutionary activities in Bengal, which primarily started during the time of Lord Curzon, who, for the purpose of bringing a divide between the Hindus and the Muslims, decided to partition Bengal, and for which he gave this particular reason that it was an administrative decision. But primarily, it was a political decision to separate the educated Hindu Bengalis from the rest, because it was in the light of the spread of the Western education that the Hindu Bengalis ultimately they started realizing that political freedom was an expediency, because they were being looked down upon by the foreigners. One of the persons who played a very important role in actually bringing about this particular realization amongst the educated Bengali Hindus, and also in the province of Maharashtra, was Swami Vivekananda. Now, during the course of his travel, he developed. He actually, he gave many sermons, and one of the sermons that he gave was that you cannot have political freedom you cannot have spiritual freedom until unless you have political freedom. And political freedom was when you are living in a free land. That is the place where you can do, to the best of your ability, service to your own religion and service to your motherland, that is Bharat Mata. So he issued a clarion call to all Indians that 50 years, because this speech was delivered somewhere in the during the late 1890s, that for the next 50 years, I call upon all the Hindu young men and women to keep only one thing in their mind, and that is the freedom of Bharat Mata. He also emphasized on the point that since each and every individual must die, so it is therefore essential for him or her to live for a particular cause, and let that cause be the freedom of your own motherland. These talks did play a significant role in motivating people like, for example, Mr. Bagajotin and various other freedom fighters, not only from Bengal but various parts of British India, that it is important for us to first of all ensure that we are staying in a free land where we can profess our own culture, religion, language. And that is one of the reasons why even Sri Aurobindo Ghosh and his Anushilan and his this Juganta Samiti, they used to follow very strictly these religious principles. Now, unfortunately, in June 1902, at the age of 39, Swami Vivekananda passed away. And after he passed away, his mantle was to some extent taken up by Sister Nivedita. So Sister Nivedita then subsequently decided to undertake a tour, a whole India tour, during the course of which she first of all landed in Nagpur, where she interacted with Lokmanya Tilak, and subsequently she also interacted with, then subsequently she arrived in Baroda. It was in Baroda that she got in touch with Sri Aurobindo Ghosh, who was then teaching at the Baroda Government College. And during the discussion with Sri Aurobindo Ghosh, Sister Nivedita made it, she requested Sri Aurobindo to come to Bengal, because Bengal was at that time facing the brunt of Lord Curzon's policies. So in 1902, Sri Aurobindo ultimately, for the first time, he decided to come to come to Bengal to, if I may use the word, check the waters. So an important role was played by Swami Vivekananda and subsequently by Sister Nivedita, not only to rouse in each of these great souls the urge to fight for freedom, but also to give birth to a coordinated activity that would ultimately see the end of the British rule. Was that I wanted to speak about today, because it is very important for us to understand that the religious leaders, for example, Swami Vivekananda, did play a significant role when it came to motivating, especially the revolutionaries. So it is a very important thing that each of us must appreciate. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. So we'll do the first reading session. So the PDF is there. So we will be reading with you, and the audience will be reading with the PDF which we have on the screen. So you can go ahead and start reading.
Okay. So following the first war of independence in 1857, rural Bengal was witness to multiple movements arising, arising out of the rural discontent. These movements did not disturb the British, as most of these movements were localized and it was not associated with any degree of violence, but at the most, the farmers took recourse to legal means to address their issues. And they were not anti-imperialistic. So as a result of which, the British were not really bothered. But in the meantime, the things changed as the young Bengalis took to Western education in large numbers to become eligible for the government jobs. These Bengalis also got introduced to the Western philosophy that stressed the need for political and spiritual freedom. The speeches of Swami Vivekananda also stressed on similar views. Young Bengalis who also then took to reading the revolutionary literature, which were written by Italians, French, Russian, and others. And it resulted in them developing in themselves an urge to get rid of the foreigners so that the Indians could establish themselves as free people in a free world. It was only in an atmosphere of political freedom that spiritual freedom could be attained, as was taught by Swami Vivekananda, and he called upon the youth that those alive must die, and since die we must die for a cause, and one such cause should be to ensure the freedom for the motherland. In one of his speeches delivered in Madras, Swamiji called upon the youth to focus on attaining freedom for the motherland, and if the Indians were to concentrate their resources for the next 50 years, nothing could stand in their way. So this formed the basis of the revolutionary activities, especially in Bengal and subsequently in rest of India as well. Then we come to the next page. Now the year of 1902 was significant in the history of Bengal. You have to scroll further.
Yeah, I'm just doing it. So
yeah.
I have to scroll further.
Yeah. Yes, further. Yeah. We have now come. Yes, that's fine. Now, the year 1902 was significant in the history of Bengal. In March 1902 was set up the Anushilhan Samiti by Mr. Satish Chandra Basu and barrister Pramotanath Mitra. This Samiti was initially meant only to promote physical training and involve the youth in the community service, but the police were very much clear that there was also a political undertraining of the youth. Now, in July 1902, Bengal and India lost Swami Vivekananda at the age of 39 years. And following which, Sister Nivedita decided to travel all over India to spread the message of the Swamiji. Okay. She met Mr. Tilak at Nagpur in September 1902, and in October 1902, she came down to Baroda, where she met Mr. Aurobindo Ghosh. During the course of the meeting, Sister Nivedita invited Mr. Aurobindo Ghosh to Bengal and lead the movement which was being carried out. Right? So this is up to what I have did. I've actually covered today, and subsequently, Sri Aurobindo, through the intervention of Sister Nivedita, was introduced to Mr. Bagha Jotin and others.
Yeah. I think it's a very interesting juncture where we are reading. So we will take a few comments and then we'll move to our next reading. So let's take a few comments and then we'll go ahead. I think there are a few specific questions also are there. So we'll be, and for the audience, we have also pinned the book. The book is pinned in the chat. So people who want to buy the book, you can go to Amazon and buy the book. I think the information and the research done by Dr. Mr. Raja Bhaumik is excellent, amazing. So you will get a lot of new information which is not available in other books. It's a very easily readable book. You don't have to have a dictionary to read the book. You can read the book in small bits and pieces whenever you want to. The chapters are very precise, concise, and has easily digestible information which you can read. So people from 10-year-old to 90-year-old can read the book. So I'll encourage people to go and buy the book. The link is there in the description, also in the chat. It's pinned for you. Yeah, so there are few comments which we'll take and then we'll go to the next uh, chapter. Okay, we have this specific comment of Saptarshi. Is it true that Swamiji once mockingly insinuated Congress as a petition begging party?
Uh, this particular terminology was the term which was used by even the ordinary people to actually describe the moderates in the Congress. At that time, the moderates in the Congress were of the opinion that therefore that they should actually plan their agitation against the British on three lines. Now, first is pray, second is petition, and then after that, the protest. So, as a result of which, the British started taking uh, this particular methodology very lightly, and they were only uh, returning, if I can use the word, they were only returning the protest through bits and pieces of certain reforms. As if, for example, they were throwing the crumbs of bread on the road for the dogs to, have a meal. So as a result, so it was really also, this was one of the reasons why people like, for example, Mr. Bal Gangadhar Tilak in the province of Bombay, then Lala Lajpat Rai in the province of Punjab, and Mr. Bipin Chandra Pal in the province of Bengal, who were also referred to as the trio of the revolutionary activities. They decided to take the movement to the next level, wherein they basically wanted the people now to understand that it was time that a movement was launched which only focused on one thing, that is the riddance of the British from the land of the Bharat Mata. So they focused on complete independence, unlike the moderates, who were led by Mr. Gokhale, Mr. Firoz Shah Mehta, and others, who were of the opinion that the British rule was good for India, because they had all the faith in the British sense of justice and also fair deal. And uh, so as a result of which, therefore, Swamiji certainly used this particular term to describe the method in which the Congress at that time was working.
Thank you. So we'll take one more question before we move to the next reading session. This is, how is that Bhagini Nivedita's seminal contribution as an editor to Bande Mataram and Karma Yogi is fully undermined by our historians?
Yeah, Mr. Saptarshi, see, the basic problem with our history is that it has been nuanced and it has been, taken over by people who are really not willing to bring out the truth. So therefore, and therefore, this sort of observations we never knew, and it is one of the reasons which prompted me to undertake all the efforts to write this sort of a book, because that is the reason why I have labeled my book as an untold story. you don't get to read all these things in the standard textbooks of history, especially with regards to the Indian freedom struggle, in which also the revolutionaries have been given a raw deal. So there is no mention in most of the books. There is no significant mention of the revolutionaries. So therefore, automatically, it is quite but natural that there will be no mention about the heroic roles that were played by each of these eminent souls.
Sure. Thank you. So we'll go to our next reading. So next reading is on which, could you just give me a little bit of intro before we start the reading so the audience will know
Yeah,
the context?
the next reading is basically about the revolutionary activities in the Madras province. And because we usually think, we are given to understand that it is only Bengal and Punjab which gave India a lot of revolutionaries. The other important contributor was Madras province, and the other important province was the province of this Maharashtra, that is the Bombay province, from where Mr. Savarkar and everyone came from, including Mr. Bal Gangadhar Tilak. They came. At that time, the Bombay province included not only the present-day Maharashtra, but also the present-day state of Gujarat. From the present-day state of Gujarat did give birth to prominent people like, for example, Mr. Gandhi, Mr. Jinnah, and also to Mr. Verma, Mr. Shamraji Verma, who set up India House in London. So, coming to Madras province, this was a province wherein the revolutionaries were not as significant in numbers as in the other provinces. So therefore, not much is known about them. But I tried to read certain books, and then from that book, I was able to cull some information and bring it to the notice of each and everyone through my book. And in my bibliography, a reference is also appended to. And today, in the age of Dr. Google, in the age of Google, you can obviously search and find out for yourself the basic information, and then if at all you have the urge to go ahead, it is all yours for the taking.
I have prepped the book. So is it the chapter
Yes.
we'll read today?
Yes. I will be reading this chapter.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So now, when it comes to the Madras province includes the present-day states of Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala, and also Karnataka. So not much of significant revolutionary activities were taking place in the province of Madras when you compare to the range of activities that were taken up in Bengal, in Maharashtra, or even in Punjab. But yet they did play an important role. Now, the revolutionary activities in Madras province were mostly centered around certain individuals, most prominent of which was Mr. VVS Iyer, who was very closely associated with Mr. Savarkarji when both of them were at India House in London. That is the time. But after Sir Curzon Wiley was shot dead by Mr. Madanlal Dhingra in June 1910, from that time on, Scotland Yard issued a clear notice to the India House that India House has to shut down. As a result of which, most of the inmates of India House, they scattered mostly to Europe. Most of them went to Europe, wherein most of them settled in Paris or in Berlin. So one of the prominent people who went to Paris was Mr. VVS Iyer, where he stayed with Mrs. Bhikaji Kama. Now, during that particular stay, it was important because at that time, both Mr. Iyer and Bhikaji Kama were planning to actually salvage, if I can use the word, or rather, for example, work for the release of Mr. Savarkarji, especially when his ship from London was to stop at Marseille on way to Bombay. But unfortunately, we shall talk about it in a subsequent discussion. But unfortunately, they were unable to do so. So Mr. Aiyar then reached Paris, and in the guise of a sadhu, and he was able, and then he subsequently, upon informing Mrs. Kama that he had successfully reached Pondicherry. Why Pondicherry? Because Pondicherry at that time was a French colony. So automatically the British police or the British intelligence did not have the jurisdiction to arrest people in the province of Pondicherry. By that time, Swami Aurobindo had already reached Pondicherry in 1910, and he set up his own ashram in Pondicherry, where some degree of the revolutionary activities were taking place. And it was a place where, for example, prominent revolutionaries from the Madras province like Mr. Subramaniam Bharati, Mr. Subramaniam Siva, and others used to come and meet. So they used to organize meetings from time to time and identify those people who were to be their targets because they were torturing the Indians. Now, one such person who used to frequent this place was Mr. B.O. Chidambaram Pillai. Now, Mr. Chidambaram Pillai, he carved a niche for himself by actually challenging the British in the because at that time all the navigation was carried out by the British. So it was a monopoly which Mr. Chidambaram Pillai had the guts, if I may use the word, to challenge. So he set up the Swadeshi Shipping Company.
Uh,
And
Rajada, I have a surprise
Huh.
for you.
Huh.
I have this.
Right.
So I have this book which I have half read. So I thought this would be a surprise
Uh-huh.
for the audience as well. That
Uh-huh.
Rajada is talking about the person, and there is a book written. So you can go and buy this book as well. So it's a very interesting book where it documents the shipping company that Mr. Pillai had formed. So
Uh-huh.
I thought, okay, I'll share this in the stream.
So can I request you to send me the link for the book so that I can get hold of the same?
Yes, I will. I'll share that. Even I will share it on the also on the description of our podcast, so people can also buy it. So they can buy your book as well as this book. So it's very important.
Because these are the things which are not spoken of, but each of them played a significant role in really galvanizing the people against the British rule. Now, coming back to the point, so when Mr. Chidambaram Pillai set up the Swadeshi Steamship Company, the British got upset because it was directed against their monopoly in with regards to the British maritime activity. So the collector of Tuticorin at that time, Mr. Robert Ashe, he was instructed by the British that certain proceedings should be initiated to see the end of the end of the day for this particular company. And when he started investigating, of course, with a malified intention, the things obviously started turning against Mr. Chidambaram Pillai. And ultimately, he was then arrested along with Mr. Subramaniam Siva. Now, in retaliation to that, the first and the only political murder in the Madras province was carried out. And this was carried out in on June 17, 1911, when Mr. Ashe and his family and his wife were planning to travel from Tuticorin to Kodaikanal to to take care of the children over there. So at the station, as they were boarding the train, one Mr. Vanchi Aiyar, he was one of the revolutionaries who boarded the train in a group of 3 people. They identified Mr. Ashe, and he was shot point blank. Subsequently, Mr. Vanchi Aiyar, he left the train and he ran and locked himself into the toilet of on the station, and that is from where his dead body was recovered by the police. So therefore, this was the only political assassination that was carried out in the Madras province. So I think this book, which you just showed to each of us, will actually go a long way in highlighting, this unsung heroes of the Indian freedom movement. So I just wanted to bring to light, but I had no idea that this book really existed. So it will certainly be, it is a pleasant surprise for myself to be informed by you of this wonderful book, and I certainly look forward to getting the book from myself or from Amazon at the very earliest. So if you can
I
kindly
will.
send me the details, very kind of you.
I will. I will send you. I will send you the link also. Once the stream ends, I'll give all the details. So even I'll send to the audience as well.
Thank you.
Audience will also buy the book. Actually, I had compiled a little bit of article on the influence of Mr. Iyer. So this is something
Hmm.
I had compiled from the AI engine. So for the audience to actually get more information regarding what was really happening. So this is something which I did actually get some information on his activities. So we'll go back to our reading. So I'll just prep it. Give me 30 seconds. Till then, Doctor, get some glass of water. Yeah. So here is
Thank you.
the book. So we can start reading.
Okay. So revolutionary activities in the Madras province. The revolutionary activities in Madras province were carried out on a much lower key when compared to that of the provinces of Bombay, Bengal, and Punjab. However, things changed following the arrival of Mr. One second, please. Yeah. Following the arrival from Paris in of following the arrival in Pondicherry of Mr. Vinayak Savarkar's confidant, Mr. VVS Iyer from Paris in November 1910. A group of young revolutionaries had formed a group called the Bharat Mata Society, of which Mr. Iyer became a part, and they started receiving funds from the trust in Paris, which was established by Mrs. Bhikaji Kama, of which Mr. Iyer was an important part. Mr. Iyer took charge of the group, and the group received funds from Paris from time to time. With the day of the royal Dalbar slated for December 1911 approaching, Mr. Iyer and Madan Puri decided to strike. Okay, so therefore, pamphlets were printed and distributed, conveying the revolutionary messages which motivated many, with Mr. Vanchi Aiyar from the Madras province being one of them. They decided to eliminate Mr. Robert Ashe, the tax collector of Tirunelveli. The latter was instrumental in closing down the Swadeshi shipping company of Mr. Chidambaram Pillai. He was indoctrinated into the philosophy of revolution by Mr. Nilakant Brahmachari, and he became a member of the Bharat Mata Sangam, which was plotting to eliminate Englishmen from time to time. Here he was trained in the handling of arms by many, including Mr. VPS Iyer. On 17th of June 1911, Mr. Ashe boarded the train at Tirunelveli. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
On 17th of June 1911, Mr. Ashe boarded the train at Tirunelveli Junction on way to Kodaikanal. Accompanied by his wife, the couple was on the way to meet their 4 children in Kodaikanal, and while they were waiting in the first-class compartment, 2 young men entered the same, and one of them was Mr. Vanchi Aiyar. He took out a Browning pistol and shot him dead, got out of the carriage and ran along the platform and took shelter in one of the laboratories. After some time, when the police entered the laboratory, his body was recovered. Mr. Vanchi Aiyar attained martyrdom on 17th June 1911 by committing suicide after killing the Englishman. This was communicated to Mr. Savarkar, who by that time was at cellular jail in the Andaman Islands, and also to Madame Puri in Paris by Mr. Aiyar. So next, I'm going to read about Mr. B.O. Chidambaram. Mr. B.O. Chidambaram Pillai. They just have to scroll a page down.
Is that
No.
Subramaniam?
Next.
Uh,
No.
okay, next.
Next.
Yeah.
Mr. B.O. Chidambaram Pillai. So Mr. B.O. Chidambaram Pillai, born in 1872 in Tirunelveli district of the Madras province, from a young age received physical training and in course of time, became proficient in wrestling, sword fighting, horse riding, and other physical sports. He was then sent by his father to Tiruchirappalli to study law, and in 1895 he was appointed the government leader in his hometown. Soon he went to Madras, where he met noted poet Mr. Subramaniam Bharati, and the duo became close friends. After discussing with the latter, he decided to become a revolutionary, and he was inspired by the speeches of Mr. Bal Gangadhar Tilak and became a member of the Indian National Congress in 1905. Soon the trio of Mr. Pillai, Mr. Subramaniam Bharati, and Mr. Subramaniam Siva became very close friends, and together they took part in protests against the partition of Bengal. From the beginning, Mr. Pillai was opposed to the moderates, who were accused by Swami Vivekananda uh, of, uh, of, uh, of going to the British with a begging bowl. He set up the Swadeshi Shipping Company to challenge the monopoly of the British India Steam Navigation Company. The British tried to create hurdles for Mr. Pillai, but the latter was determined, and this angered the British all the more, and they appointed the British tax collector at Tuticorin, Mr. Robert Ashe, to start acting with a malignant intention against Mr. Pillai. Another issue that angered the British was the strike in the coral mines, which was backed by Mr. Pillai and Mr. Subramanian Siva. The British decided to target them politically, and in March 1908, both Mr. Pillai and Mr. Subramanian Siva were, whilst they were participating in the celebrations to observe the release of Mr. Bipin Chandra Pal, were ultimately arrested by the district collector, Mr. Winch. In the trial that followed, both were awarded transportation for 10 years of life each, which on appealing was reduced to 6 years for Mr. Pillai and to 3 years for Mr. Siva. In prison, Mr. Pillai's degrees in law were also cancelled, and by the time he was released in December 1912, his businesses, including the Swadeshi Shipping Company, were liquidated. Under orders, he was directed to leave the district of Tirunelveli with his family, and he left for Madras. In Madras, he opened a grocery store to support his family, and then quit the Congress party in 1920 on ideological grounds, but rejoined the same in 1927. Unfortunately, his last days were spent in economic distress, and he passed away in November 1936. In his honor, the Tuticorin Port Trust is named after him as the V.O. Chidambaram Port Authority.
Thank you. It was really interesting. Actually, I did not know about him. So, as I am in southern India, so I somehow found this book sold in one bookstore. So I immediately bought this book online. I think it's available, but not very popular among people.
In fact,
So,
just to bring to your notice, I am actually in my bibliography. I have mentioned about a book written by another doctor, Dr. Sridhar. He's a plastic surgeon. And he has written about the unsung heroes from the Madras province. So, so as you go through my yeah, you can take down the title, please, for all the people who are interested. Forgotten Freedom Fighters, the Unsung Heroes of Tamil Nadu by Dr. K. Sridhar. So this is the
let
book from
me,
where I culled this information.
yeah,
It is available on Amazon.
we'll post this. We will post this. We have one
Yeah.
question, so let's take this.
In my list of bibliography,
Hmm.
This is in point number 65.
Got it. Got it. We will post this. We will post this post the stream. We will. Sir, can you tell about the letter which was found in pocket of Mr. Uh, Vani? Sorry about the pronunciation.
Mr.
Vanichindian
Ayyar, Mr.
Ayyar.
Vanchina
Mr.
Ayyar.
Yeah, where he explains why he was against British rule.
I will have to search the book because I did not make a mention of the letter in this particular book of mine because because I did not have much information about the letter. But I will certainly try to gather all the information and address this particular query because yes, I now realize that is a lacuna which needs to be filled up at the earliest. I think the book which Mr. Mandal showed us, I think that might as well carry the information because it is a book which is only which is only dealing with Mr. Chidambaram Pillai. So I think we might as well get this information from that book. But I'm very sorry I didn't. I'm not quite aware of this particular facet.
Sure. Anyway, even I will go and check this book and see the letter. If I find it, I will post on our Twitter handle and also on our YouTube community post with this.
That will be very helpful for each of us, including myself.
I'll do that. We'll take one more comment. So I would like to have your response or opinion on this. What is happening? Doctors, engineers, scientists are writing awesome history books. It's a critique.
I think what
it's a
yeah, Mr. Agarwal, I think rather I should address you as Abhay. Mr. Abhay, see, I think what is happening now is that there is an urge amongst the younger people to know the truth. And because we all realize that we have been dealt a wrong deal, wherein our history, our glorious history, I'm not talking only about the freedom struggle, but I'm talking even about medieval India, ancient India, and modern India. Most of the events during these three phases have not been given the importance that it deserves. We are basically taught history in a way that only talks about certain people, but unfortunately, we are not aware of what happened during this long period. And I think that is one of the reasons why all of us, doctors, engineers, irrespective of people from their background, they might not be from the history background. We are actually taking up this particular initiative not only to educate ourselves, but also to spread that particular information and share it with everyone for posterity. Because until unless each of us, we get to know this, we will not be able to do justice to the legacy of these eminent souls who fought and fought only for India's freedom. They had nothing else on their mind. They had nothing else on their mind except to see that India and Bharat Mata is not in chains. So we have to do something, and I would call upon each and everyone to certainly make up in their own way their own contribution in this regard. It doesn't require, and what I need to stress is all the more important because our professional life is very important, given. But at one point of time, we also have to understand that there is something more that we need to give back to the society than only our profession. One of the ways in which we can really give it back to the society is to teach them as to how great our land is and that we should take pride in everything that has happened in India over the years. So I think that is one of the reasons as to why we are all, people who are not historians by their qualification. The historians are not by their qualification. They are taking to writing these books. Another thing, if I may add, is that most of the people who are, professional historians, this is my personal opinion. Okay, most of the people who are professional historians, they are actually they follow a certain line which is dictated by the books that they read. On the other hand, people like us who are not professional historians, we are in a position to adopt, if I may use the word, an unbiased approach. Because our and only sole and only aim is not to bring truth to the fore. We are not we know very well that we might not be able to get access to the various archival information simply because of the fact that we are not historians, professional historians. But at the same time, there is a wealth of knowledge which is dealing with the truth that happened, and that is very important for us to know. Once we know them, we can then take it to the next level. It is not like I told in one of the functions where I was awarded for this book, that a common refrain is that, so this book is not a part of the curriculum. Fine, let it not be a part of your curriculum, but at least in a week you can devote, say for example, 2 to 3 hours to read a particular aspect of our freedom struggle. Not only our freedom struggle, to read a certain aspect of our Indian history, and then share that knowledge with each and everyone whom you come across. And that is how that particular word will spread, and people will be motivated to know exactly what has happened. I think that answers my question to the best of my ability. But again, I am putting a disclaimer to the fact that I have no contempt for people, for the professional historians who are doing a great work. No, I don't have. But yes, sometimes you are constrained by your own environment.
I have a follow-up
Thank you.
question to what Shoptorsi has asked. Okay. Uh, as you mentioned, correct, whether it's
Hmm.
an ancient period, whether it's a medieval period, whether it's a modern period, the kind of history are being taught to our in our schools as history textbooks, they are missing a lot of important information regarding the civilizational heritage of Bharat. Okay. Is that by accident? Is that by ideology? Is that by something else we should not uh, name it? So, what is your opinion? Why you have to write a book to highlight information which was omitted deliberately, accidentally, by choice? That I'm not able to judge. But what is your opinion?
It is a combination of various factors, and many of those factors we have also listed. So therefore, it is better for us not to really take this forward, because then I think we might be sounding something, we might not be correct in bringing other aspects into play. My book, let me tell you one. My book is only written with the purpose of educating the people of what actually happened. I am not. Again, it is a disclaimer from my side. I am not at all trying to put this book out with an interest to garner any political brownie points. It is only to make them aware, because I, for myself, I used to feel ashamed of myself when I found for myself that I was not able to answer many of the questions pertaining to the Indian freedom movement during the quiz programs. So that was one of the things which really prompted me to start, you know, uh, read about the freedom movement in detail. Because, and unfortunately, the most important problem that I faced was that there was not a single book which dealt with all the aspects of the freedom movement. So you have multiple books. So that is the reason why I'm sure, why I when we met for the first time, I informed you that it is backed by a didactic bibliography. So if you have to put in so much of effort, just to know about the Indian freedom movement, then automatically what will happen is that at the end of it, your interest will completely go out because we have other things to also take care of. So therefore, my effort in writing, my aim of writing this book was to bring everything under one roof to the best of my ability. And that everything also includes the activity of the revolutionary, because that is an aspect which has been missed out, which has not been dealt with for reasons best known to the authors. That has been not been mentioned in most of the books. There is only a mention in the passing that the revolutionaries did play a role. Beyond that, except with the exception of Netaji Subhas Bose, most of our history books are silent when it comes to the contribution of the revolutionaries. For example, I will tell you, in not in the books that I read prior to me starting to write this book, I never found a mention of the important role of Mr. Madan Lal Dhingra or the role which was played by Veer Savarkar and so many people. So I was really taken aback when I started reading the books which dealt with these eminent souls in some detail. So obviously, so therefore you are very well able to understand that we are being deprived of this essential knowledge. And if we do not know, we cannot blame the people who will be coming after us that they are not at all interested to learn about such great people. Thank you. I think we're on the mute.
Sorry. Yeah. So we have found the letter which was
Yes.
there online. So it is already shared on
Ah,
the screen. So audience, and you can read it. What is written there. So it's very interesting. He mentions a word, a specific word called nature for the English people. So it's kind of interesting history to it. So we'll talk about this in
mhm.
some other stream, not this stream. With regard to Mr. Savarkar, so I have this book. Uh, this is a very interesting
Yes.
title of the book. So I bought this book for a reason that it mentions that somebody who could have like undone the partition. So
Yes.
I have I have read many books on Savarkar, but not this specific like headline of the book.
This
The
is an
title of the book is
excellent book.
very, yeah. So I bought this for reason that the man who could have prevented partition. So that
Yes.
got my attention. So I bought this book on the airport where I was traveling recently. So
Mm.
I have Savarkar's Rasa Darshan as well, in his book on Hindutva. But it's very interesting book. So like people who want to discover more about the Indian freedom struggle, go ahead and explore a bit of the Amazon library and other libraries where you have. One such
Yes.
for this matter, not to actually advertise any political party, but if you go to BJP, Bharatiya Janata Party's online library, you will find a lot of books which are freely available and in very good print copies are there. You will also
Yes.
download the soft copy of it. That's a very good resource available from the BJP's website, library and archive. So people who want to explore more about the revolutionary movement, people who have fought English, especially people like Mr. Savarkar. So it would be very interesting for others to read. Yeah. So we'll go
Yes.
to our next reading. So what is the next reading?
Yeah. The next topic is about how this year the Khilafat movement took hold of India.
Yeah. Could you just give me that prompt so I will get that PDF ready?
Actually, that is a very big, topic. So
Mm-hmm.
I just share with you.
Yeah, yeah. Please go ahead. In the meantime, we have that letter on the screen so people can read it and find out. something shocking information that we have. Like this kind of letter I haven't seen before. Okay, we'll take a few. Yeah, have you sent it?
Okay, I'll just give me 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, no issue. We will. Okay, he wants a zoom. Okay, let me
So
zoom a
can I
little bit.
just read the letter while Vivek?
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Uh,
Go ahead.
can you scroll a little bit
Just
up?
hold on. I am just doing it. I'm just let to zoom it because actually they need.
So this letter is dated June 17, 1911. Uh, so who can you scroll one line above so we can see who committed? Uh, no, above. Go up. Yeah. Okay. The following is the letter found on the body of Vachintan Aiyar, who ended himself by uh, you can read the words himself in the mouth after he assassinated a British official named Robert William D. Scott Ash at Tirunelveli
Tirunelveli.
railway station on June 17, 1911. Yeah, scroll a little bit. Of the Malachas of England, having captured our country, tread over, tread over Sanatana Dharma of Hindus and destroy them. Every Indian is trying to drive out the English and get Swarajyam and restore Sanatana Dharma. Our Raman, Shivaji, Krishnan, Guru Govindan, Arjuna ruled our land, protecting all dharma, and in this land they are making arrangements to crown George V, Mlecha, and one who eats flesh of cows. 3,000 madrasas have taken a vow to kill George V as soon as he lands in our country. In order to make others know our intentions, I am the least in the company have done deed this day. This is what everyone in Hindustan should consider it as his duty. Signed R. Vanchi Aiyar, Shinkota.
Actually, I went to Shenkote previous year to visit a friend of mine there, and it's a Madrasi. So, like, it's the Madras presidency. So, it is Madrasi. It was mentioned that 3,000 Madrasis. So,
Uh-huh.
people who were part of the Madras presidency.
So even now the regiment is still called Madras Regiment.
Regiment, yes, Madras
Yeah,
regiment.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'll prep the book. Dr. Bhaumik, would you like to give a preface before you start reading? I will also be prep the article for you, prep the reading.
Yeah, I've already shared the article
Yeah, I'm
headline.
doing it. I'm doing it. You can actually just give a bit of overview to the
I can
audience.
just talk about it in short. I can give a brief
Please,
insight.
please. Yeah, please go ahead.
So, the Khilafat movement was basically a movement which was very much dear to the Muslims of India, and it was primarily to restore the caliphate in Turkey, because by that time it was becoming very clear that most of the Turks, they were against, I mean, especially, because actually the British, who were then taking the leading role in during the course of the World War One, they were trying to find a way out to replace the caliphate. And Sultan Abdul Hamid II, who was the caliph at that time, he realized that one of the ways in which the Muslims of of his empire could be brought under one roof was through bringing into account the phenomena of pan-Islamism. And unfortunately, this particular pan-Islamism was also supported by Kaiser Wilhelm II, who was at that time the Emperor of Germany. And he, for one, realized that in order to get the British out of Asia, Middle East Asia, and along with that, to bring an end to the British rule in India, which was the jewel in the crown, One of the important ways was that to support the pan-Islamic movement. And in 1911 came out the book Germany and the Next War by one of the generals, and he emphasized that this was one of the ways in which the British could be driven out of entire Asia, including India, the jewel in the crown. So the entire pan-Islamic movement it started from Turkey, and then an emissary from Turkey, he visited India by the name of Mr. Afghani, and he spoke to some of the Muslims in North India, and he stressed the need that this particular pan-Islamic movement should also take its root in India. And one of the important aspects of this particular trip was to ensure that the caliphate in Turkey was not disturbed. So, as a result of which, therefore, unknown to most of the Indian Muslims, they were actually now supporting a movement which was not at all involving India. It never called for the British to move out of India. And given the fact that Aligarh Muslim University was set up by Syed Ahmad Khan with a clear direction to the Muslims of India that they should not take part in any political activity and they should adopt Western education and consider the British to be their benefactor. So initially, the Muslims were mostly in favor of the British. But with the Balkan Wars in 1912, 1913, where the British did not play an important role, and where the Ottoman Empire, they faced a lot of reversals. The Muslims in India were certainly agitated because they now realize that with the loss of territory in Europe and in Asia, the Caliphate of Turkey was certainly being threatened. And one of the ways in which it could happen is by means of the Sultan being deposed. So, as a result of which, in India, for example, this particular activities started, and one of the important centers was certainly the Aligarh Muslim University. When Mr. Gandhi came to India in 1915, for the first 1 year, on the instructions of Mr. Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Mr. Gandhi kept himself away from any political activity. He was at that time studying the Indian political situation. But unfortunately, in February 1915, Mr. Gopal Krishna Gokhale passed away. And also in November 1915, another prominent moderate, Mr. Firoz Shah Mehta, also passed away. Now, the moderates were always of the opinion that the British rule is good for India, because they had their sense of justice and they had a sense of fair deal. Everything changed with the Jallianwala Bagh episode, and it was after the Jallianwala Bagh episode that for the first time, Mr. Gandhi, who at that time proudly had declared himself to be an obedient servant of the British Empire, decided, along with Mr. Motilal Nehru, the father of Jawaharlal Nehru, to they decided that they must oppose the British, because the violent face of the British Empire has now come to the fore. So therefore, they were now very clear that the British rule is not meant for the benefit of India. After the Jallianwala Bagh episode, Mr. Gandhi now, and also following the demise of Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak on 1st of August 1920, Mr. Gandhi decided to take up the cudgels. And the way he did was to actually talk about the Hindu-Muslim unity. One of the ways in which he wanted to establish the Hindu-Muslim unity was that by calling upon the Hindus of India to ultimately support their Muslim brothers to ensure that the caliphate in Turkey was restored. This took many of the Hindus, including the political leaders of the Congress, by surprise. And one of the persons who was certainly not very much impressed by this move of Mr. Gandhi was Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Mr. Jinnah had always supported the moderates of the Congress, but he did want certain benefits for the Muslims of India. And he was of the opinion that politics and religion should not be mixed. Unlike Mr. Gandhi, who was of the view that both politics and religion are two sides of the same coin. So it is indeed surprising for us to understand and to realize that a so-called separatist and the father of Pakistan, Mr. Muhammad Ali Jinnah, to start with, was a nationalist who wanted a united India which did not believe in any discrimination or divide and rule between the two largest communities in India. Now, many Hindu leaders in the Congress, they were also of the opinion that it is not correct to mix religion and politics. But then ultimately what happened is that under the guidance of the Ali brothers, that is Mr. Muhammad Ali and Mr. Shaukat Ali, it was very clear that emotions took the hold of the reality. They became the center point of Muslim politics. So by the time the Congress called for a new, for an emergency session in Calcutta in August-September 1920, Khilafat had already taken a stranglehold of the policies. Now, there is a certain problem. Now we have to come to the point. Another aspect. See, the Khilafat movement was for the restoration of the caliphate, and Khilafat means against. So what the Congress, they actually took recourse to the fact that the people would understand Khilafat movement as a movement directed against the British. But actually it was for the restoration of the caliphate. There was no convergence of political ideals between the Khilafat party, the Muslim League, and the Congress party. The Muslim League was certainly very much concerned by the fact that most of the illiterate, emotional Muslims were joining the Khilafat organization, which was being led by the Ali brothers. So as a result of this, therefore, Mr. Gandhi realized for himself that now it is the Khilafat movement which is bringing all the Muslims together. So under the alibi, if I may use the word, under the alibi of establishing Hindu-Muslim unity, he now called upon all the Hindus of India to stand united with the Muslim brothers and ensure that their political goal is finally attained, on the basis of which only the Hindus and the Congress can fight together and really give the British a run for their money. That is how Mr. Gandhi, in a nutshell, was able to convince many of the leaders in the Indian National Congress, including Mr. Chittaranjan Das, and others, and Mr. Jinnah also to a certain extent, that the Congress should support the Khilafat movement. Another reason as to why Mr. Gandhi was able to win over the Congress was because Mr. Shaukat Ali, especially, and to some extent Mr. Muhammad Ali, were to bring, were in a position to bring their supporters in large numbers. So there was certainly overwhelming majority of the Muslims who then took over the control of the special session of the Congress in Calcutta in August-September 1920, and under the pressure of which Mr. Gandhi ultimately, his opinion ultimately prevailed, and in which, and subsequently, this was endorsed. This was endorsed by the regular session of the Congress, which was held in 1920. So this is, in a nutshell, tells you about the genesis of the Khilafat movement. One of the reasons, now during this particular Khilafat movement, Mr. Gandhi put forward the argument, put forward the fact that the Muslims have to give him a promise and ensure that the Khilafat movement was a non-violent one. On that basis, when the Indian National Congress movement again met, the Indian National Congress again went for this annual meeting in December 1920. This particular Khilafat resolution was accepted, but it was accepted with a significant amount of apprehension from many of the Hindu leaders of the Congress. But Mr. Gandhi was able to ensure that it sees the light of the day. Now, during that period, and the other way in which he won over the people was that he assured that Swaraj will be won at the end of the year. So that means that somewhere by 1920, by the end of 1922, 21-22, India will win Swaraj. And many of the leaders of the Congress party, they were not willing, or they were unable to share the same amount of optimism that was there in Mr. Gandhi's mind. And this is corroborated by the fact that when the non-cooperation movement was called off in February 1922 after the Chauri Chaura incident, many of the leaders of the Congress, they were unable to explain as to why it is being called off. And Mr. Chittaranjan Das, he then, in a discussion with Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, of course at that time he was Subhas Chandra Bose, in Alipur Central Jail in Calcutta, he certainly passed a comment that Mr. Gandhi is very good at organizing a movement, but at the same time, he leaves it halfway, as a result of which, therefore, we the leaders have to suffer loss of face. So this particular sentence which I quoted, is actually written by Mr. Subhash Chandra Bose in his book, The Freedom Struggle from 1920 to 1942. So you can as well read the book and find out for yourself that it is not a matter of hearsay, but it is something which did happen during the course of discussions between the two great leaders of the Indian freedom. Now, in India, the Khilafat movement was primarily on the basis of the restoration of the caliphate in Turkey. The Muslims in India were getting restive as the things were not materializing or turning out to be the way that they wanted. And there were stray incidents of violence in which, unfortunately, the targets were the Hindus. Most of the Muslims who were a part of the Khilafat party, they started thinking that it is the majority of the Indians who are not allowing the Khilafat movement to see the light that it deserved to. And that was one of the reasons, that was one of the, that was one of the thought processes, if I may use the word, that ultimately led to the Mopla genocide in 1921-22. There is no evidence for us to suggest, for people like me, who is not a historian but who has read through all the books, that it was primarily a sort of a class conflict. No. It was very clearly a conflict in which the Khilafat party tried to establish its control over that part of Kerala, and in order to do so, they decided to do it at the expense of Hindu population, who unfortunately were mostly the landlords. But there is evidence to tell that it was some sort of a class conflict. It was clearly a communal pogrom which was carried out in that part of the present-day Kerala state to establish the rule of the caliphate. And in fact, you will be shocked that one of the Muslim leaders, he was appointed as the local caliphate, whom, of course, after 2 or 3 days, the British forces were able to, take hold of and imprison him. So it is very, very clear from whatever study I did. Okay, whatever study I did, which is very, very clear that it was not a class conflict. It was purely a religious one, wherein the Moplas, who were Muslims, they ultimately blamed the Hindus for the fact that the Khilafat that the restoration of the Caliphate in Turkey was not being realized, and they took the things into their own hands. So, in brief, this is about what prompted what brought about the Khilafat movement, and also the various incidents of violence, with special emphasis on the Mopla genocide, which took place during August to November of 1920-21. And surprisingly, let me add to this particular thing. If violence was the reason for Mr. Gandhi to call out, to put an end to the non-cooperation movement after the Chauri Chaura incident, this genocide did not prompt Mr. Gandhi to make a similar declaration. So it is very difficult for one to really tell what was going on in his mind.
Yeah, actually, my system crashed, so I had to restart my system and everything. So apologies for this. So I am back online.
I have continued the sharing of the book.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for all the support Nandi has given. So I have a question regarding this. Yeah, Nandi, go ahead. You can ask the question.
Dr. Bhaumik, you were mentioning it was not a class struggle. There is a quote directly in your book by Mr. Gandhi, that how he addressed the speaking of the perpetrators of Mopla incident, God-fearing Moplas who were fighting for what they consider as their religion in a manner they consider as religious. So it was very clear. It was not a class struggle, and it was clearly based on religion.
Yes. But unfortunately, I think most of us are given the wrong picture.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I wanted to bring out through my book, to the best of my ability.
Yeah. So the false narratives that has been going around, that saying it's all about class struggle and poor Muslim farmers rebelling against rich Hindus. There's nothing like that in this scenario.
I will give a very simple example. Like I read in one of the books, that there were many Muslims, many Muslim landlords in that part of the state. but none of them were harmed. This is very much similar to what happened in Bangladesh as well. For example, in Noakhali,
Mhm.
where selectively only the non-Muslims were at the end of the sword. Now, if, for example, the mistreatment is like, for example, if there are people telling that the Muslim subjects were not treated properly at the hands of the non-Muslims, that also doesn't hold good, because even the Muslim peasants and the Muslim zamindars and landholders were also under poverty. It is not that the Muslims under Hindus were in extreme poverty, as compared to that of the Muslims under the Muslim zamindars. It is not so. So therefore, there is no evidence for us, even though I'm a non-historian, there is no evidence on the basis of which we can tell that it was a class conflict, other than the fact that it was dictated purely and purely by the religious ideals. And that is borne out by the fact that there is a lot of similarity between what the non-Muslims faced in the Malabar and subsequently what they faced in East Pakistan or West Pakistan during the time of transfer of power. So there is,
So,
to the best of my knowledge, there is no class conflict.
yeah. So here's a judgment from 1921 I would like to read out. Uh,
Hmm.
Judgment in case number 7 of 1921 on the file of Special Tribunal from Calicut. This was written by Diwan Bahadur C. Gopalan Nair in his book The Mopla Rebellion in 1921. So he says it
Yes.
was not merely fanaticism, it was not agrarian trouble, it was not destitution that worked in on the minds of Ali Musaliar and his followers. The evidence conclusively shows that it was the influence of Khilafat and non-cooperation movements that drove them to their crime. It is the distinguish the present from all previous outbreaks. Their intention was to subvert the British government and substitute Khilafat government by force of arms against Hindus.
In fact, uh, you made a mention of Mr. Musaliar. Mr. Musaliar was
Mhm,
actually declared. He was appointed as the local caliphate. When the Muslims they attacked the British forces and
mhm.
established their control, they immediately appointed this gentleman as the local caliphate, who was subsequently arrested by the British and then he was put on trial. So the non-cooperation movement was overtaken by the violence of the Khilafat movement, but that did not prompt Mr. Gandhi to call off the movement. In fact,
Mhm.
he went to Mopla, he went to the local area, and he spoke to the Muslim, he spoke to the to the non-Muslims who had come in great numbers to seek his intervention, and they were surprised when Mr. Gandhi very clearly put forward to them that your women were attacked because you were not in a position to protect them. And therefore, I call upon you to face death with a lot of glory. The same thing Mr. Gandhi had also spoken of to the non-Muslims in Lahore when in August of 19 when in 1947 he had arrived in Lahore on his way back from Jammu and Kashmir. And when the non-Muslims from Lahore went to Mr. Gandhi told them the same thing, that if you cannot defend yourself, you must die with a lot of honor. And when they requested Mr. Gandhi to stay back in Lahore to protect the non-Muslims from Punjab province, Mr. Gandhi told them that he has to attend some urgent work at Noakhali. Even though by that time peace was restored in Noakhali. So I have made a mention of that in my book, but I think as we go along, then we can really talk about it in detail, because that comes under
Mhm.
the violence around partition time, which
Mhm.
happens to be the
So,
last chapter
mhm.
of my book.
So we discussed about the uh, Noakhali incident in the last stream by another author called Bijit Prashantha.
Yes,
So he
yes,
painted
yes,
a very
yes,
similar picture. Yeah, we
yes.
would like to know your perspective as well.
It's very clear, no?
Mhm.
It's very clear. Mr. Gandhi, with due regards, okay, Mr. Gandhi never had the need to observe any fast when when the non-Muslims were at the receiving end of a violence which was perpetrated by religion. He never did.
Mhm.
Whether it was during partition, whether it was after the assassination of Swami Shraddhanand, whether it was in the after the Pohat riots in Northwest Frontier Province, at no point of time did he undergo any fast. Even to highlight another incident, a fast, which was his last fast during at Delhi in the month of January 1948. So one
Mhm.
of the reasons for him to undertake that fast was, number one, to emotionally blackmail the Indian political leaders to release to release 55 crores to Pakistan, and also number one and number two, to undo whatever injustice has been done to the Muslims who were forced to evacuate to Pakistan. So he had dictated a letter to his secretary, Mr. Pyarelal, to that effect, wherein so many 7 points. I have made a mention of that in my book as well. He mentioned 7 points on the basis of which he will call off his fast. And none of the reasons and none of those points were in favor of the non-Muslims who has been who were displaced from their hearth in in such precarious times.
Mhm.
So that tells the story. That tells the story to some extent about, if I can use the word, about the biasness that Mr. Gandhi certainly harbored for
And
the other
this sentiment still
community.
exists.
Yes, and it will haunt us. It will haunt us for all times to come.
Uh,
Unfortunately, we have to live with the truth.
Dr. Raja, I have
Yeah.
one question before we go to the last session. So this is from Hindu Vichardhara show. Uh, is this true? The person who betrayed Chandrasekhar Azad was Yashpal, a card-carrying CPI member who was later awarded Padma Bhushan by Congress government. Controversial
With due
question. So
respects, yeah, with the concept, but then with due respect, I will certainly come to this point when we come to the relevant chapter, because I have dealt with all these things under the chapter of revolutionaries. So I will talk about this point when we come to the relevant chapter.
sure. I think let's go to our last reading session. So the last reading session, I have prepped the PDF. Let me know if it's the exact one or we need to do any changes. Is this the one, Doctor, we will be reading?
The last chapter is with regards to Swami Sadhanand.
Yeah. So this is it the Rowlatt Satyagraha? Because
No, no,
here
no,
I
no,
see
no,
a
no,
lot
no,
of,
no, no.
which one, just if you could
Last.
tell us.
Yes, yes, yes. I'll just tell you. Just give me 2 minutes time, please.
Mm-hmm. In the meantime, we have one more little bit of information I have prepared. So let me share this with the audience.
Yeah, this is in chapter. This is in chapter
Chapter 2. Okay. Chapter 2A
two,
or 2A or 2?
section D. 2D, section D. From
2D.
chapter 2,
Okay.
section D.
Yeah, I am going there. I think you will be there. It's a very okay. 2D, 2A. Okay, it has only 2A.
No, no, 2 capital D, not 2A. 2
Capital.
capital D,
Okay,
subsection
is it
D.
a different chapter? Okay, let me go back. So this is the first reference I got of Swami Sadananda. Is this the one? I'll go back. Next, 23rd. This is not the one,
No, no,
correct?
this is with regards to Mr. Savarkar. So we have to
Okay,
scroll down further.
okay. Scroll down further. Is this
You
the
can
one?
keep scrolling.
Keep scrolling. Okay, I'll keep scrolling. No problem.
What is the
Now,
chapter about?
Yeah, this is about how Mr. Gandhi reacted to the murder, no, to the assassination of Swami Sadananda. Can you please go up? I just check. One
I
second,
think
please.
is it the one
This is the
D?
one. This is the one.
Okay,
D1.
okay.
Yeah. So
So we can.
this also. Yeah. Yeah. Tell me, please.
No, I just increase the font so people can read it. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to put a disclaimer. See, whatever I had spoken of during the course of our discussion today with regards to certain events, these are my personal opinion. And I am not over here to impose my opinion on anyone, whether it be my reader, whether it be the persons who are a part of this particular podcast or subsequently, or those who read my book. I would request each and everyone. I would request each and everyone to kindly go through the book and then form their own informed opinion. I am I am not here to impose my opinion on anyone. I am just telling what I felt was the fact after I read through all the things, and I put it down on the paper. So please, I request each and everyone to please consider that. It is not my opinion, and it is not an opinion which I wish to impose on anyone. Please go through and then form your own individual opinion. I am not here to impose my opinion and then try to justify the same.
Point
Thank you.
well taken. So even from our end as well. So I have read through parts of the book. So the book gives you the information which is there with references. So it has only a raw information, and it's up to the reader to process the information as per their understanding of it. So everybody will have a different kind of understanding of the information provided in the book. So the books puts out the information for the reader. Reader will read it, and then they will form their own opinion. So that is something which is quite unique about this book, because as human beings we tend to have biases when we, whether we write a book or whether we are saying something to something else. Fortunately, in this specific book, the bias is not there, as information as transparently as possible is shared in this book, and it is left to the reader to form their own opinion. So in that specific instance, Dr. Bhaumik is actually quite right. Is that okay? He has put out the information for the audience to consume, and let the audience consume and form their own opinion about the incidents what he narrates. Yeah, Raj, Dr. Bhaumik, so we'll go back to our
And
reading
I
session.
want to add one point. This has been vindicated by as respectable a person as Mr. T. Hanuman Chaudhary, who is the President Emeritus of Pratna Bharati. So I had the privilege of presenting my book to him, and within 10 days he came back to me. The sir was kind enough to come back to me, and he called me to his residence, and he told me that the book is absolutely unbiased. It is just it is just a chronicle of the events as they happen, and it is for the intelligent reader to it is for the reader to read and decipher for himself to the best of his ability whatever information is there in the book. So I am very thankful to everyone, including to yourself. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. So we'll go ahead and start our last reading session for the chapter named Communal Problems in British India, Assassination of Swami Shraddhananda in December 1926 and Mr. Subhas
Yes,
Bose
yes,
between 1924 and 27. Go ahead.
yes. So I am basically limiting my talk today only to the assassination of Swami Shraddhanand in December 26. The reason why I'm trying to highlight this particular issue, including the communal problem in British India at that time, was that the Hindu-Muslim unity which Mr. Gandhi spoke of, and he stressed that the Khilafat movement will ultimately bring that about, was a flash in the pan. Because even during the time that the Khilafat movement was going on, there were incidents of violence, including the Mopla genocide of which we spoke of, that happened. So Hindu-Muslim unity was not the business of the Hindus only to ensure. There had to be some degree of reciprocation from the other side to bring into reality the concept of Hindu-Muslim unity. And from the time that the Khilafat movement came to an end in 1924, after Kemal Atatürk in Turkey had dissolved the caliphate, there were incidents of communal violence. And India was at the receiving end of the communal violence from that period onwards. To that extent, where a leader like Lala Lajpat Rai, he was of the opinion that it is important for the Punjab province to be divided on religious lines so that communal harmony could be restored. And this he wrote in a series of articles which were published in the Tribune newspaper. Now, another incident happened during that time, and that was the Shuddhi movement, which was carried out by Swami Shraddhananda. The Shuddhi movement basically was a movement which was trying to bring back Muslims who had converted from Hinduism. And it was primarily at that point in time directed against the Muslims in the present-day state of Rajasthan. So this particular act of Swami Shraddhananda earned the ire of certain Muslim religious scholars, especially in Deoband, and ultimately they recruited one person by the name of Mr. Abdul Rashid, who was to carry out the dastardly act of killing Swami Shraddhananda and bringing this particular Shuddhi movement to its knees. During November of 1926, Swami Shraddhananda was affected by pneumonia, and after he recovered, he was then shifted to his hut in Delhi for the purpose of recuperation. And during December 1926, on one of the fateful days, Mr. Abdul Rashid, he went to that place where Mr. Swami Shraddhananda was recuperating, and in face of the multiple protests, he ultimately was able to gain access to the place where Swamiji was. Upon reaching that place, Swami Shraddhananda, upon reaching the place, Mr. Abdul Rashid asked the attendant to get him a glass of water. And as soon as the attendant left, he was assassinated. Swami Shraddhananda was assassinated because Mr. Abdul Rashid pumped 3 bullets into him. When this particular incident happened, the news of this particular assassination reached Mr. Gandhi, who was at that time in Guwahati, attending to the annual session of the Indian National Congress. And surprisingly, instead of castigating Mr. Abdul Rashid, Mr. Gandhi told only one thing, that Mr. Abdul Rashid is my brother. We should not blame Abdul Rashid for this assassination, but we should actually blame people who have poisoned his mind to carry out this dastardly act. He never had any qualms in not blaming Mr. Abdul Rashid or pulling him up for this particular act of mindless violence. Subsequently, we know what happened. Mr. Abdul Rashid was ultimately, because, see, the fairness of the British was that Mr. Abdul Rashid was arrested, he was put on trial, and then after that, the British sense of justice took its own course. So, in a way, you can tell on the lighter side that Mr. Gandhi's confidence in the British system of fair justice was upheld. So
Understood.
I just
So
wanted,
we'll read. Hmm. Yeah, actually, we are running out of time, so we'll just start reading the chapter. We will also take some questions from the audience. So
yeah, I think it's better because this is a very small event, so which I just dealt
yeah,
with. I think because of lack of time, we can take some questions. That will be better.
yeah. So we'll take the question, so that will make much better sense. Okay. So let me go through the questions, and also there are a few comments as well. So in the meantime, it is already prepped there, so people can actually read a few portion of it until we
Okay.
see. Okay, I have one question before I go for the audience question. So I have read a few books on Indian freedom struggle, and this unflinching confidence from Mr. Gandhi on his like confidence on the Muslims of subcontinent to be part of Indian society and part of Indian freedom struggle. And as you mentioned in multiple instances, there was no such cooperation coming from the Muslims of Indian subcontinent, whether it's the Mopla riots, Mopla killings, we can say, or the Noakhali killings happened. So, like, what convinced Mr. Gandhi to continue the same policy after seeing multiple incidents where things were not happening as he wished for? So, what is your analysis of this while writing the book?
My analysis, in the light of the questions that you have just put forward, is the fact that certainly Mr. Gandhi thought that it is the Hindus who should carry out what he wanted to preach at their own expense. That I think, to the best of my ability and understanding, that is the only thing that I can really fathom. Because he never had any stomach to really pull up, pull up the Muslims for the various acts of intolerance. He put the entire money to him and for him. It was the Hindus who were only at the receiving end, if I may use the word, of his sermons of non-violence. The same sermons, and see, and I'll tell you one thing, he realized the futility of his advice basically on the fact that after the Noakhali incident, when he went to Noakhali, for once he did not pull up the Muslims. He was walking barefoot on the ground, which was strewn with the feces, which was strewn with glasses, but he just wanted to, wanted to spread the message of peace. What message of peace can you spread amongst people who have made up their mind to ensure that their part of their country is only for people who follow their religion and no one else? And this has been
Thank,
also been vindicated by the fact that the Muslim League did never criticize the Muslims of Northwest Frontier Province, Punjab, for the violence that was meted out to the non-Muslims in that part of the country. And this is exactly one of the reasons for which the Jodhpur and Jaisalmer did not join the Union of Pakistan, even though Mr. Jinnah told them that all the demands will be met. When the Maharaja or the Maharana of Jaisalmer he put it out to Mr. Uh, to Maharaja Hanuman Singh that your majority of your subjects are non-Muslims. What are you going to do when a communal program is carried out? Because the government of India and Sardar Patel, who was the Ministry of Home at that point in time, had made it very clear that once you join Pakistan, the government of India will not come to your help for any reason whatsoever. When, when Hanuman Singh was faced with this particular question, he realized for himself that he had made a great mistake. And then he told Mr. Jinnah that I need to go back to my own province and talk with all the stakeholders, including my subject and my prime minister, and then come back to you. Mr. Jinnah realized for himself that that is the end of it. So therefore, Mr. Gandhi at no point in time had the stomach, if I may use the word stomach, to really advise the Muslims that they should as well practice the doctrine of non-violence. For him, the doctrine of non-violence was only and only for the Hindus, who he advised at all points in time that they should meet death with dignity. And this was the
Understood.
similar advice which Mr. Gandhi had for the English during the World War I, when Hitler was about to invade Germany.
I got your point.
So,
I think audience also got your point.
yeah.
Okay, so I have just one counter question before we take the audience question. So, does Mr. Gandhi's unflinching belief in Vaishnava traditions of non-violence is something to do with his, uh, let's say, inclinations towards non-violence by all means possible?
I don't have much information in that regard, because that will talk about Mr. Gandhi's philosophy. But I can certainly tell that I can certainly inform all the august audience that Mr. Gandhi was certainly very much partial in spreading his doctrine of non-violence. If he wanted to be the leader of the masses, it should have been for everyone across all divides. But that was certainly not the case for him. It was very, very, and very clearly only meant for one section of the people, that you should not complain even if you are at the receiving end of their sword. What is, to a person like me, it certainly doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so we'll now go back to the questions. So the first question from Shaptorshi: has the author come across any opinion on this Khilafat shenanigans from the perspective of revolutionaries?
It did affect the revolutionaries, because when it came to the Khilafat question, for the revolutionaries, it was very clear that the freedom of India was paramount. And there was no question of the divide and the rule policy being implemented. So many of the revolutionaries did not take very kindly to the Khilafat movement, as did the majority of the congressmen. But ultimately, the death of Mr. Lokmanya Tilak at such a crucial juncture enabled Mr. Gandhi to impose his line of thought on the Congress party, who were overwhelmed, if I can use the word, who were overwhelmed by the number of supporters Mr. Shaukat Ali and Mr. Muhammad Ali could bring along with them. And Mr. Jinnah, even he was very much against, as I had already mentioned, he was very much against mixing religion and politics. And he was political, and he was almost booed away from the Nagpur session 1920 of the Indian National Congress. And that was one of the reasons for him to ultimately quit the Indian National Congress. So therefore, the majority of the congressmen, irrespective of the fact whether they were, whether they were revolutionaries or whether they were moderates, majority of them were against the Khilafat movement. But ultimately, it was India's misfortune, if I can use that word, misfortune, that Mr. Gandhi won at the end of the day. But his
Thank
opinion
you.
was certainly absolutely misplaced.
Yeah,
Thank you.
historically or in hindsight, we can now say that I think there is some audio from your end, back end. Could you just mute it?
I don't
Oh,
know.
no.
I think it's my plan from my end.
Okay, okay. Yeah. Okay, you can go mute. Yeah. So we have one more question from Saptorsi himself. Rabindranath Tagore is always depicted as someone who opposed nationalism as against humanism. I think he meant humanism. So
That again deals with the philosophical aspects. So I am not, but yes, I want to bring one point to the fore that Mr. Rabindranath Tagore certainly opposed Gandhi's policies when it came to the non-cooperation movement. Why did he oppose? He opposed it on the basis of the fact that Mr. Gandhi had given a call even to the students to boycott their schools and colleges. So as a result of which, what he felt was that when the students are being allowed to quit their education, it certainly harms the society in the long run. Number one. Number two is that he was of the opinion that unnecessarily these young people are exposed to the brutality of the police oppression. And that is one of the reasons you will find that ultimately over a period of time, the non-cooperation movement lost steam because most of the young people, whether they be students or whether they be professionals, they ultimately had to quit the movement because they were no longer able to put up with the police torture. This could explain the fact that when Mr. Gandhi ultimately launched, he started the Salt March or the Salt Satyagraha in March 1930. He did not call for this quitting of schools or courts. And he did not employ young people. He employed professional satyagrahis to accompany him who were ready to face any degree of torture just to ensure that they did not break the rule of satyagraha. So Rabindranath Tagore was certainly opposed to this form of nationalism wherein people were called upon to quit the schools, the colleges, courts, and everything. Regarding the rest of the thing, I am not quite aware of that because that will take me into a lot of social aspects. Like, for example, Mr. Satyashi has quoted about the film and about the book, Ghore Baire. So I don't want to, really go into that line because uh, it doesn't really involve my scope of study.
yeah, so we'll take one more last question before I'll have a few things to ask, and now people can also ask questions. So he mentions Gandhi justified non-violence to Hindus by citing examples of Prahlad and Ambarish, which is stupid, uh, which was pointed about by Pandit Taraknath, saying citing examples of Deva and Asuras make no difference.
Just to clear the air, Mr. Gandhi met Mr. Savarkarji in London on two occasions. I don't remember the dates exactly, but during one of the meetings, Mr. Gandhi and Mr. Savarkarji, they were addressing a group of people in India House regarding how to bring about the freedom. You will be surprised that Mr. Gandhi there spoke of the importance of celibacy. because what he wanted to emphasize and what he subsequently also wanted to emphasize as Noakhali also, that by remaining a celibate, you will be able to demonstrate the power of nonviolence. And when Mr. Savarkarji he rose up to speak, he made it very clear that it is only on the basis of your strength that you can protect the dignity of people under you and that of your motherland. So I think what Mr. Saptarshi has actually highlighted by quoting Pandit Tarak Ratnaji, I think lives up to his point of argument.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bhaumik. So we have few minutes. So
Welcome.
I have a
I'll
question. Can I?
go ahead.
Uh,
Go ahead.
like,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
so,
Go ahead.
so I'm quoting from this book by Subhash Chandra Bose, The Indian Struggle. So here two movements are mentioned, Tanzim and Tabligh. So he mentions it as a movement started among the Indian Muslims in opposition to the Indian National Congress. So if you have any
No,
insights into
these
this.
two movements, these two movements were actually started against the movement
Mhm.
launched by Swami Sadhananda. When he started the Shuddhi movement, these two movements started at the same time to ensure that more number of people are brought into the fold of the Muslim religion.
So what Subhash Chandra Bose ji mentions exactly. So what actually irked the Muslims to harm uh, Shraddhanand ji was there was a certain sect of Malkana Rajputs who
Yes,
were
Malkana Rajput.
originally Hindus. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
So
even this some of
it did not cross my mind. Sorry for interruption.
Go ahead, sir.
So actually, I was trying to recollect the name of that particular clan of Rajputs, but it was not coming to my mind. I am very much thankful for highlighting the same. But it is actually because of the number of Muslims who were trying to reclaim their lost faith that prompted this particular thing to happen. Very, very similar incident is also seen when Mr. Nehru, after the 1937 elections, where the Congress won a landslide and the Muslim League was decimated, he started talking about the economic alleviation of the Muslims, of all. Across really, because Mr. Nehru was a socialist, so he did not believe in the religious divide. And when a lot of Muslims were ultimately shifting from the Muslim League to the Indian National Congress, Allama Iqbal, who wrote Sare Jahan Se Acha Hindustan Hamara, he spoke to Mr. Jinnah that something must be done to ensure that the Muslims do not join the Congress in large numbers. And it was after this incident that Mr. Jinnah, who used to consume pork, who used to consume liquor, he started adopting the Muslim signs. And he adopted the slogan that Islam is in danger. This particular slogan of Islam is in danger prompted many of the Muslims to reconsider the decision to leave the Muslim League and join the Indian National Congress. So you see how history repeats itself. So therefore, there is some justification in me quoting at the beginning of the book that if you want to learn today, you must learn yesterday. Thank you.
Yeah. So thank
Yeah.
you, Nandi, for the question. So we'll take last question for the day, and that would be from Mr. Abhay Agarwal. A lot of India's misfortune was result of Mr. Gandhi's ego.
I think the answer is best left to for everyone to decide. And I would request
Yeah.
everyone to go through the book and then they can decide for themselves. I don't want to impose my opinion. I told it very clearly at the beginning of my talk that I am not here to impose my opinion. I leave it to the reader to go through the book and then form his informed opinion. That is my duty. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we have one more interesting comment. So Jinnah wanted to be the Gandhi of Muslims. Like he wanted
Mr. Khan, Mr.
to
Yeah. See, Mr.
like
Jinnah was very clear on one thing. He wanted a separate land and a separate territory for Muslims. And because he realized Pakistan can only come into existence when a certain territory has been actually bequeathed for them. I would rather feel, after having read everything, that Mr. Jinnah was politically correct when it came to striving for the rights of the Muslims. But Mr. Gandhi, but we Hindus have paid the price for the Indian National Congress of that time to be politically correct at the expense of Hindus. And we are still paying the same.
yeah, we have one more very interesting question from RS. Thank you, RS, for joining. Thank you for the support. So, what kind of relation was there between Netaji and Rabindranath Tagore? Is it true Netaji supported idol worshipping, which was opposed by uh, Rabindranath Tagore? So, for the audience
I can
who are
only
not
tell,
familiar,
sorry,
yeah, just to get the clarity, because the people who are listening outside Bengal or maybe in India might not get the context right. So, Rabindranath Tagore was part of the Brahmo Samaj movement. And the Brahmo Samaj movement believed in not no idol worship. So they believed in uh, Brahma as a Nirakar Brahma. So the Brahmo movement did not believe in worshipping a murti or an idol. So from that context, RS is asking whether there's a difference of opinion between Subhash Chandra Bose, who believed in idol worship, and Rabindranath Tagore, who was a Brahmo, he did not believe in idol worship. So your opinion?
uh, see, I can only quote certain examples, especially from the Indian pilgrim, that as an individual, Netaji was very much, taken to spirituality. And he, at one point of time, he was ready, but when he was very young, he left his house without informing anyone that he was on a mission to search, to find out his guru. And he did not, to the best of my ability. And even during the time that he was in during the INA movement at Burma, in Burma, there are evidences to record to let us know that Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose used to go to the Ramakrishna mission, attend to the prayers, and he had always and always been a very, very close follower of Swami Vivekananda. So therefore, in that case, I don't think he was opposed to idol worship, and he used to organize a lot of Durga Pujas also in his locality. So I don't think that he was opposed to idol worship, but these are great, great men. I think we should not restrict them to only the religious feelings, but we must see them in the proper perspective.
Sure. Okay. So I think we have taken all the questions which were there for tonight. And I'll finish with one specific point which I wanted to talk about when the question came regarding the nationalism. So I read a very small book called Nationalism, written by Rabindranath Tagore, where he is somehow influenced by the nationalism of the European countries, or, or ethnicities. And from that perspective, he was evaluating the Indian nationalism from that lens of Western lens of one specific ethnic identity which constituted nationalism without any spiritual or scriptural uh, added to the context of nationalism. So in that context, people, some might misconstrue that okay, Tagore was against nationalism as per se, because he did not believe something which was good for India as a whole when the freedom struggle was going on. But that specific article or the specific book that he has written is not the whole concept which is there for Tagore. So Tagore has also wrote about a poem on Shivaji, on Hindutva. Okay, and
Mhm.
Tagore's writings are full of examples where he is acknowledging the superiority or the spiritual heritage of Bharat, which is there in Upanishads, in Puranas. Okay. So, quoting only one specific article written by Tagore on a specific moment of time where he is comparing the Indian nationalism to the nationalism that is there in India is not something which gives justice to the whole his idea of nationalism. So, just wanted to keep that as a perspective.
Absolutely. The
Okay, so
opinions will
we have,
certainly differ from time to time.
yeah, so it's an evolution. So like we think in
It is a
binaries.
dynamic
Okay.
process.
Yeah, so people's perspectives change over time with experience, with the new data that we gather. So at one point of time we might have opinion, but when we get more data, we talk to more people, we read more books, the opinions evolve over time. Okay. And that credit needs to be given to every human being. Being Rabindranath Tagore, he is entitled to change his opinion when he gets new data, and that also happens with Bhagat Singh as well. So a lot of our history books are somehow misconstrued that okay, Bhagat Singh was a kind of a Samajwadi person initially, but he changed his mind later, and that is not documented in our history books. So that gives a kind of a dishonest perspective from the way it is shown. So I think both perspectives needs to be given to the audience. Audience can make a decision out of that. So partially sharing the truth is something which is not good for the audience because they'll not be able to form their own opinions which are based on facts. We also see Niner here coming has come. Okay, I
That is
will
the
take this
essence of my
one.
book.
Yeah. So before we end, again, we would request the audience that if you want to know the unbiased truth, the unbiased information on Indian freedom struggle, go ahead, buy the book. The link is pinned in the description. The link is also available on the description of this video. You can go ahead and buy this book. And Dr. Saab will be available maybe in 2 weeks' time again on a Sunday evening at 8 p.m., where we'll discuss few more things, few more interesting topics and chapters of Indian freedom struggle. Yeah,
Thank you.
last
It would be
question
my
we'll take.
pleasure as well.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Dr. Bhaumik. Thank you for the audience for bearing with us. And I had to like go. I was dropped from the call for my system being shut down. Apologies for that. So fortunately, I came back. So thank you, audience. Thank you, Dr. Bhaumik. Namaste.
Welcome.
Jai Shri Ram. Vande
Namaste.
Mataram.
Jai
And
Shri
Dr.
Ram.
Bhaumik,
Vande
stay
Mataram.
in the studio. Just don't exit the studio yet. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.